Hi, I'm Seth Boffeli with AARP's Fraud Watch Network, and I want to welcome you to this important discussion about fraud, scams, and the coronavirus. Big thank you to AARP Vermont for hosting today's Facebook Live conversation. In the face of this global coronavirus pandemic, AARP is providing information and resources to help older adults and those caring for them protect themselves from the virus and to prevent its spread from others. Another thing spreading is scams related to the coronavirus, and today we're going to talk about how you can avoid them, spot them, and as we always say, if you can spot a scam, you can stop a scam. You can find resources from AARP about the coronavirus, both about healthcare, finances, and scams at aarp.org/coronavirus. Before we begin, I just want to do a quick reminder. AARP is a nonprofit membership organization. We've been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years. Today we're going to talk about coronavirus frauds and scams and how you can take the important steps to protect yourself. We'll share AARP's Fraud Watch Network tips and resources on how you can stay safe from frauds and scams, and we'll address your questions. So put your questions in the comment section of this video and we'll get a chance, we'll take some of them. And if you don't have a question, just drop a line, let us know where you're watching from today. We'd love to find out where across the state of Vermont we're reaching people. Scammers look to capitalize on the news in the moment, and especially the headlines can instill fear and motivate people to act. And this is obviously the situation we find ourselves in. Coronavirus is no exception. While the scientists and the medical professionals are working overtime to find a cure, to find a vaccine, scammers are working just as hard to steal your money and your sensitive information. So over the course of the next 20 minutes or so, we're just gonna talk about some of the coronavirus scams we're seeing, and then how you can spot them, how you can stop them. AARP's Fraud Watch Network has done polling. We've actually found that 80% of people who know about a scam avoid falling victim to it. And so the most important thing you can do is inform yourself, and we're going to try to do that today. So why coronavirus? Well, first thing is scammers are always looking for opportunities, and one of the biggest opportunities is uncertainty. Scammers do something like they want to do something we call putting you under the ether. And so that's getting you in this uncertain, unsure state where you don't really process opportunities or risks or threats the way you normally would. And so whether it's the economy, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the uncertainty of when things will get back to normal. Lots of us are in that sort of uncertain state right now. And we're all sitting right next to our phones or right next to our emails, which is the way that scammers like to reach us. So in a lot of ways, this coronavirus is the perfect storm for scammers, and they are pouncing. Today, I'm going to talk about three kind of general themes that we're seeing and provide some stories. The three things we're seeing a lot of financial related scams. We're seeing a lot of healthcare related scams, and then also a lot of charity scams, and scams in general. Like I said, it's the perfect storm, and so a lot of that is happening. So let's start with scams revolving around the stimulus payment. So whenever there's, when it's tax return season, scammers are there. Whenever there's money from the government that's going out to people, scammers are there ready to pounce. So what are two different scams we've seen revolving around the stimulus payment? Well, the first that we started seeing in late March were text scams saying, we can get you to the front of the line to receive your stimulus payment or your economic assistance payment as soon as possible. Click this link and go there. Well, that link is just meant to either put malware on your phone or get you to fill out a survey that has personal information that can be used against you. So that was number one that we saw. Then once the checks started going out, they went out. They didn't go out uniformly. So some people got them wired in their account within the first couple of weeks. Some people are still waiting for a check in the mail. And so that's an opportunity that scammers were taking advantage of in the form of email scams. So these were emails that would come into your inbox to say, click on this link to check the status of your stimulus or your economic assistance payment. And a lot of these emails were doctored so they looked legitimate. It looked like it might have come from the IRS. We call it spoofing or government imposter scams. So they were designed to make it look legitimate, to make you click on that link, provide your information because you thought you were dealing with a trusted source. So those are the two things that we saw a lot around the stimulus payment. So what do you do to stop it? Well, number one, don't ever click on a link that you don't trust or don't understand. Sorry, or you don't recognize, I should say. If that text seems, if you don't trust that somebody can move you to the front of the line, then don't click on it. If you get a link in an email that looks like it comes from the IRS, don't click on that link. Open up your computer browser, type in irs.gov or search for the IRS, and go to the legitimate site, and that's where you can find that information. That's how you know that you're actually dealing with the trusted source and not somebody who's pretending to be that trusted source. Okay, second thing we're seeing a lot of are healthcare related scams. And so again, let's talk about a couple of examples. In the very first days of the coronavirus outbreak, we saw a lot of miracle cure scams going around. People selling something that could cleanse your system, or selling products that would clean your house, that would basically suck the coronavirus out of your house. Well, all of that is fake. Luckily, the FBI and the Federal Trade Commission were really aggressive on snuffing some of these scams out as soon as they saw them. One of these examples, and there's actually a great article on it at aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork, but it involves a sort of a smaller Hollywood actor. So this individual, I think, had smaller parts in some of the Iron Man movies, but enough to generate quite a social media following. I think he had around 2.5 million Instagram followers. So early in March, this individual starts telling his Instagram followers that he has found a cure for coronavirus, and this is an investment opportunity. You can get in on the ground level. The informant who took this to the FBI was given an opportunity to invest $300,000 on a miracle cure that was going to generate billions in revenue. So again, I think according to the article, the FBI shut this down in about 10 days. These quick fixes just don't exist. And so that's something to be leery of when you see that or hear about that. The second thing is around testing. For testing is becoming more widely available, but still a lot of people who can't get tests or want to test can't find it. And that was really true a month ago. And that's really when we saw a lot of scams around testing. So either an email scam saying, sign up here to get a free test kit. You just needed to give your Medicare number, which is something you should never give away. Or, we saw this news report in Louisville, Kentucky. There was an empty lot next to a gas station, and one day, all of a sudden, there was a testing site there. There were vans, there was tents, there was people in protective equipment. You could pull up and you could get a swab. It only cost $350, or your Medicare number. And so luckily in that situation, there was a very quick acting city councilman who represented that district, who found this site and went in to find out what hospital they were with. Well, it turns out they weren't with a hospital. They were with a healthcare marketing firm out of Chicago. And quite literally, this gentleman ran these crooks out of town because they weren't doing legitimate testing. They did not have access to coronavirus tests. And so not only were they taking people's money, but they were promising somebody a test result that they just weren't going to deliver. And so that's another example that we've seen literally across the country. So how do we stop it? What do we do to stop it? And so the number one is just do your research and understand that as much as we would like a cure as much as we like a vaccine or a knockout treatment, they just don't exist right now. And so we have to be patient. Anybody offering you something that sounds too good to be true probably will be. And that's both the case when they tell you you won the lottery, and also the case when they tell you we have a miracle treatment that's going to protect you from this virus. Avoid scare tactics. This is really important in healthcare related scams. As I talked about that under the ether, sometimes scammers try positive motivation and sometimes they take negative motivation. Well, negative motivation works a lot more than positive motivation. So anytime they can get you scared in a fearful state of mind, they're more likely to be able to take your money. And so anything that tries to get you fearful and then asks you to act right away those are things to look out for. And never, ever, ever give away your Medicare number or your healthcare number to anybody other than your trusted medical provider. And certainly not over the phone or the internet, and not somebody that you just met or you can't verify who they are. So for folks who might have just joined us, I just want to do a quick reminder. My name's Seth Boffeli. I'm with AARP's Fraud Watch Network. We're doing a Facebook Live with the help of AARP Vermont. The Vermont office has great staff and volunteers who are dedicated to fighting against identity theft and financial crimes. I was actually in Vermont last fall when the trees were beautiful, and with a group of volunteers and community partners, we made thousands of calls to Vermont residents, reminding them of steps they could take to stay safe from fraud. I'm an advisor with AARP's Fraud Watch Network. I'm actually coming to you today from my guest bedroom in St. Paul, Minnesota. My job with the AARP Fraud Watch Network is to work with states all across the country, and that gives me kind of a front row seat to a lot of different financial crimes. So fun job, right? But it's important, and this call today is important. AARP Fraud Watch Network research has shown that 80% of people who learn about a scam are less likely to fall victim to that scam or to engage in that scam. So by learning about the things we're talking about today makes it much more likely that if those scams are sent to your phone, sent to your email, or show up on your doorstep, you're less likely to engage in those scams. And if you don't engage in those scams, then you can't fall victim to these scams. Feel free to put a question into the chat box on the Facebook Live, or just let us know where you're watching from. We want to talk now about charity scams. This is another example that we see a lot of times. This is something I call kind of an evergreen scam. Whenever there's a natural disaster, whenever there's a holiday season, or whenever there's a time of need, these charity scams will pop up. And sometimes the email from the fake charity claims to be, a brick and mortar nonprofit that's raising money for people who are out of work, or raising money to buy equipment for first responders. Or sometimes it's a fake GoFundMe account. So, they concoct a story of a family in need. They make that family from your community, and then they send the email out to the masses. But all the proceeds that go in go to the scammers and not to the real people in need. So what do you do if you're offered one of these opportunities? So what do you do before you write that check or you send that money online? So first, always double check the source. There's some great resources on the screen. charitynavigator.org and give.org are two great places. If you're presented with an opportunity from something that looks like it's a legitimate brick and mortar charity, go to these two websites and look that organization up to make sure it really exists. Ask questions, and really be mindful of these new, all of these new online ways to give. PayPal, Kickstarter, GoFundMe, Venmo, they come with their own set of vulnerabilities. They're not as, if you send money to somebody through Venmo or PayPal and it goes to a scammer, there's really no way to get it back. It's not like your credit card company where you can say, hey, this was a fraudulent charge put on my account, and then that you're not responsible or liable. Once that money is sent in PayPal or Venmo or these online apps, if you find out it wasn't meant to go there or it was a scam, there's literally no way to get it back. So be very leery. And if you're ever asked by anyone that you don't know to send payment in form of a gift card or a wire transfer, be very, very suspicious. Anybody who asks you to send them $500 in iTunes gift cards is trying to scam you. And so you should just know that flat out. If that ever happens, that is the biggest red flag that somebody's trying to take advantage of you. We're also seeing scams that aren't necessarily related to the coronavirus or the economic downturn, but are more related to this isolation that we're all feeling. The number one reason that makes a senior or an older American vulnerable, more vulnerable to scammers, is that some of them tend to be isolated. They might live alone. They might live in a rural community, and their children have all gone. And isolation leads to loneliness and a need for a social connection. And that connection is what scammers offer. And that's really how they get people under the ether. And so a lot of us are really experiencing this isolation for the first time now. And it is making all of us more vulnerable to scammers. And so two ways that we're really seeing that. The first is puppy scams or pet scams. The BBB did research a couple years ago. If you type in buy a puppy into Google, their research showed about 80% of when those results come back and they say sponsored on them, the BBB found that, the Better Business Bureau found that 80% of those sponsored links were most likely fraudulent. And so what all a scammer really needs to do is set up a slick looking website, go on the internet and download some cute puppy kitty pictures and put them up online. And so when you think you're buying that pet, you'll make the first payment. Well, then you'll get an email saying, well, we need vaccinations. So then you make that vaccination payment, and then you'll get an email saying, well, we need shipping costs. And so little by little, there's just more and more costs associated with these fake pet scams. And then finally, at the end of it, your pet never arrives. And so not only are you out money, you're out companionship that you were looking for. So if you're like a lot of friends of mine on my Facebook feed, you might be interested in getting a puppy or a kitty. It's legitimately happening. But look for a local resource. Look for a breeder or a adoption option in your community. And while you might not be able to physically go there now because of social distancing, you can at least, that exists in your community. You can call and talk to somebody, a real person, and verify that it is legitimate. And so that's one thing to look out for. And then the other thing we're seeing that really is the biggest isolation scam are romance scams. And they're happening not just to people over 50, but really kind of people of all ages right now. And it's not so much about getting a date or hooking up. It's really about an emotional connection. And that's something that people are craving right now. And that's really, a lot of times we think of scammers as somebody in the basement, going through your garbage, but they're really complex business-like organizations. And a lot of times these scammers are students of psychology, and romance scams are the ultimate psychological scam because they are offering a connection to somebody that doesn't have a connection. It's not really about romance. It's about somebody to talk to, somebody who will listen to you. And once that connection, that psychological connection is made, then the conversation switches to, I have an investment opportunity, or, my car broke down. And that's when the monetary scams really kick in. And they're really nefarious because of that deep psychological connection. The victim, a lot of times, they sense those warning bells. They feel like something's not right. And sometimes, even once they know something's not right, it's hard to break out of that scam because of the emotional connection. And that scammer can kind of turn the dial from a loving, trusted friend to someone who's going to shame you, to somebody who's going to outright threaten you. And it's really a complex psychological trap that these victims find themselves in, simply because they were looking for a connection, looking for someone they could communicate with and be friends with. And so how do we avoid these isolation scams? Well, number one is just only accept help from people you trust. And and make sure that, just like making sure that the email that says it's from the IRS is really from the IRS, make sure that the person you're talking to is really who they claim to be, that it's not just somebody's Facebook photo that they stole and put on a website. So you have to really kind of be your own detective here, and look for opportunities for that in-person connection whenever possible, because these relationships that only exist virtually are really hard to verify. And so I always say trust but verify, and that's really important here. You have to be skeptical, and you have to be careful. And once you start to get to that point where somebody says they're going to come and then they don't come, and this happens repeatedly, that's a sign of a romance scam. And also, once the requests for money start, that's also the sign of a romance scam. So things to look up about. I always feel like I'm Debbie Downer. I'm the bearer of bad news, because what I have to talk about is not really pleasant, and it kind of talks about the darker side of human nature. And so I always feel like I need to bring some good news with all the bad news that I'm bringing. And the good news really is, while these scams are flourishing right now, they're really not new. It's the same type of scams we've seen all along. They just have a new twist in that they're about the coronavirus. And so there's some other things to look out for are employment-related scams. So lots of people unemployed right now. So lots of people looking for an opportunity to bring in some more income. So work from home scams are really skyrocketing. This could come in a couple of different ways. You could get an opportunity to be a secret shopper, and you could get a check mailed to you, and all you have to do is go cash that check and then go buy some electronic equipment and mail them to your employer, and then you keep a portion of the check as your payment for the services rendered. Well, what happens is, I cash the check, I keep my cut, then I buy the electronic equipment, and I mail it off to who I'm supposed to mail it off to. And I find out a few days later that the check bounced, that check was illegitimate, and it wasn't a real check. So fake check scams are happening a lot these days. And so I know lots of us are looking for work. And so just make sure that any online or work from home opportunities are really legitimate, before you go down that road. And if somebody sends you a check that you're supposed to cash and then spend on, that's a huge red flag. That's how a lot of these scams start. Another thing we're seeing a lot is one of the oldest scams in the book, which is the grandparent scam. And so the way the grandparent scam usually works is, a grandparent gets a call. It says, "Grandma, this is me." And you say, "Johnny?" "Yeah, it's Johnny. I was on spring break and we got in a fight and I'm arrested and I need $5,000 wired to this account in order to get me out of jail." And so that's been around for years. I'm sure lots of people have gotten it. So the twist on this is, now it's about coronavirus. Now it's, "Grandma, I went outside. I was feeling sick, so I went to the store to get some medicine, and I forgot my wallet. I got in a car accident, and now I'm in jail. I think I have the coronavirus, and I need money to get out of jail so I can go to the hospital and get treatment. And so it's the same scam. It's the same thing to look out for. It's that urgent need, that fear factor, and then asking somebody to send them either a wire transfer or gift cards in the mail. So all those same red flags are there. So that's kind of how we that's how we stop these scams. I always say that you know, we're familiar now with the public health mantras, the wash your hands, don't touch your face, wear a mask, stay 6 feet apart. Well, in the fraud prevention community, we have our own mantras. Don't send money to people you don't know. Don't click on suspicious links. Don't answer the phone if you don't absolutely recognize the number. Let that message go to voicemail, and if it's somebody important, you can call them back. And if you get taken advantage of, it's really important to share your story either with local law enforcement, or you can go online at aarp.org/fraud watch network, and there's actually a map there where you can upload the scam, and it'll show up in the map in your community, so other people in your community can find out how to keep themselves safe. So that's kind of most of what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to leave everybody with some resources. So this is the website I was just referencing, AARP's Fraud Watch Network. Lots of great information on there, information about the latest scams, articles, great articles about enforcement, where the last busts have happened. The scam tracking map is on there. We have an AARP fraud helpline, and so that's staffed by volunteers. So if you are a victim of a scam, if you have a loved one who's a victim of a scam and need assistance, they can help. There's also tip sheets on there. I think about 40 of the top scams that are out there. So if you get a call that you think might not be legitimate, check out the list of tip sheets at the website, and you'll find out whether indeed that opportunity is fraudulent, and it's something that we've seen in other parts of the country. The last thing I just want to let everybody know is that you have a great resource in Vermont in the Consumer Assistance Program that the Attorney General is very involved in, and they have an 800 number. I don't have it on the screen, but that number is 800-649-2424, and we'll put that in the Facebook chat comments too, so you can see it. And this is the AARP Fraud Watch helpline number for anyone that wants to report a scam, whether or not you've been victimized. If you just want to let somebody know that, hey, I got this call and I hung up on it, you can also call this number, 877-908-3360. I want to thank once again my friends at AARP Vermont. While I would have loved to have been in Vermont today, I'm sure it's a beautiful day. I'm happy to connect nonetheless. I hope you learned something in our discussion today. I want to thank all of our AARP members, volunteers, and listeners in the state of Vermont for participating. If you have anything we talked about today is available on our website at aarp.org/fraud watch network. Thanks a lot. Stay safe. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon.